President Trump is still busy at work, though. He's overseas right now. His Asia-Pacific swing just had a very successful meeting with the new Prime Minister of Japan, had a very successful meeting with South Korea. He just wrapped up today. Now tomorrow, the biggie. All eyes continue to be on what will come of his meeting with Xi Jinping of China. And Gordon Chang is the guy we go to on all things China. We lean on him regularly for this. He's the best-selling author of Plan Red, China's project to destroy America, which came out last year. He's at Gordon G. Chang on X. If you follow, you should, on X. For matters like this, if you're interested in China, Gordon's an expert. At Gordon G. Chang. And Gordon, I welcome you back. Bill O'Reilly, we played a clip of him earlier in the week saying, and I thought it was pretty accurate, based on what you've told us, that leadership in China is up against it now. I read a story last week, I thought kind of remarkable, that the Chinese government is policing their social media hard. Younger people are starting to really express their discontent with the economy on social media. They're starting to want to work less. China's very concerned about work ethic slipping, productivity, joblessness. And so now it's basically mandatory smiles and positivity on social media or else. Not new for China, but anyway, are they in trouble? Are they up against it? Does President Xi need to make a deal here with President Trump, or can he still hold out? Welcome in, Gordon.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Chris. And yes, China is in trouble. We know that the economy is not growing at the 4.8% pace that they claimed for the third quarter of this year. It's probably about zero. And people are generally pessimistic, and they're angry at the Communist Party. And their anger is directed at Xi Jinping. Now, Xi just survived a leadership challenge, but he still, I think, is in trouble with the Chinese military, which is the most important faction in the Communist Party. And when you look at it, yes, he does need to make a deal with President Trump. He needs time. And President Trump can rescue Xi Jinping and the Communist Party if he does have this trade truce, which he is talking about.
Do you think that he's eager to make a deal with President Trump, or is he waiting? My working theory is also possibly, I don't know how closely they follow this. I assume they do. The Supreme Court has agreed to take up this tariff argument if President Trump is even in his constitutional authority to levy these tariffs against places like China without congressional authority. Do you think he's waiting for that from the Supreme Court, or is he trying to wait out Trump entirely, or does he have that kind of time?
I think Xi Jinping needs a deal. I think he knows he needs a deal. I think that he believes that he can get President Trump to fold. And so he's, I think, confident in his ability to manage the American president. So, yes, and of course, Xi Jinping would be very happy if the Supreme Court ruled that these tariffs are unconstitutional. So, but I don't think he's waiting for that. We will see, because tomorrow it will reveal a lot about both sides' intentions.
What is the biggest immediate need in China? Is it the work? Is there joblessness that's very rampant in China? What's the workforce look like there right now?
Officially, the unemployment rate is, I believe, 5.3% overall. But the important figure is the unemployment rate for the younger age cohorts, 16 to 24, and that number is 18.9%. That number is probably understated. The unemployment rate is almost certainly higher than that. And that's an issue because you're dealing with the part of the population that can easily take to the streets if they're unhappy.
We know China's interests in monkeying around with our social media networks and permeating our culture with things that would erode morale and cultural rot and decay. We know they've pumped that for a long time and continue to through things like TikTok and the like. I was very intrigued, though, that they're trying their best to keep the toothpaste in the tube related to their own social media use domestically. Can they control that ultimately, or is that just too much? I mean, the Pandora's box of social media is just out, and there's no way communism can actually keep people from communicating, because the story I read was young people in China, they're becoming disenchanted. They're not as interested in that kind of driven nature that China demands to get up and work and be productive and have kids. Quite the opposite, in fact. And culturally, that's something they'd love to see infect and has infected the United States. But is it infecting China?
Well, it certainly is, because there is that mood of pessimism that I talked about. You have kids basically opting out of the old style system. And what they're doing is they're calling it laying flat. Some are even, quote unquote, retiring. In other words, urban kids are going to the countryside and taking up a farming lifestyle. In other words, they're planting vegetables. So this is just a wholesale rejection of what Xi Jinping believes should be, this communist-style mentality.
Could you see it collapsing? You say the military. Is there a possibility that his own military would turn on him, or the military culture could turn?
Well, we saw that on October 17th, when the Ministry of National Defense issued their announcement that 9 senior officers had been investigated and removed. And the people who were removed were Xi Jinping loyalists, and there were no Xi Jinping adversaries among those who were canned. So, yeah, I think Xi Jinping has a lot of trouble right now in the Chinese military because it's being controlled by people who don't particularly like it.
We get, obviously, a lot of our goods and materials. We've been talking about this during COVID. When our ports shut down, we began to realize just exactly how dependent we are on China economically, our drugs and so many other things that come from them to us. Has that dynamic changed over the last few years, or is it still heavy China? I know some smaller businesses manufacture their things that they sell here. Is that dynamic necessarily shifting, given the Trump policies?
It is shifting. We are seeing delinking, and it's not only because we want to become resilient, it's also because Xi Jinping has been forcing out foreign companies. But the real story here is that it's not shifting fast enough. We know our vulnerabilities, and as a society, we absolutely refuse to do what is necessary to protect ourselves, whether we're talking about rare earths, which is what the Chinese have been using leverage over us, or pharmaceuticals, where China has even more leverage than it does on rare earths. So this is a story of the failure of the American political system. And it's not just the failure of the Democrats, it's the failure of the Republicans as well. Both parties have not taken the steps that are necessary. Shame on them, and Americans should be outraged at the people they elected to protect them.
Do you get the sense that this administration, President Trump, Scott Bessent, his economic team, they seem pretty resolute? They're not letting up on this thing. They're not just folding and giving in to anything that's kind of piecemeal. They seem to really want a whole bite of the apple, or else.
They're moving, but they're not moving fast enough. And, you could say the same thing of the Biden administration. The Biden administration took some important steps on self-sufficiency, especially in semiconductors. But they didn't move fast enough either. So this is, as I mentioned, it's a failure across the American political spectrum. We understand the problem. We understand how serious it is, but we won't take those steps that are necessary. And, Chris, this is a general disease in the United States because, for instance, we know that China is preparing for war, and yet we don't have an American president so far who is willing to talk to the American people about what is absolutely necessary in order to prepare ourselves. If we prepare ourselves, we can deter the Chinese. But if we think we're at peace, we're going to get hit, and we're going to get hit very hard.
Gordon, with about 30 seconds, what do you predict comes of tomorrow? More of the same or something different?
I think that we get a truce on tariffs and on the rare earth embargo. We know that to buy soybeans. President Trump is probably going to give him some deal on fentanyl, reduce the fentanyl tariffs, which he shouldn't do. But, this is generally going to be sort of like both sides step back and get themselves ready for the conflict that will certainly come.
The Chris Stigall Show podcast.